Mega Man Zero. When it dropped on the Game Boy Advance in 2002, it was a complete shift for the entire franchise. Capcom handed the development reins over to Indie Creates. That is a studio founded by former Capcom staff, so I'm sure they felt it was in good hands. To give a little history, Keiji Inafune was actually pushing to end the Mega Man X series entirely to focus on this new direction for the handheld market. He wanted a clean break, but Capcom executives were hesitant to let Mega Man X go, as they should have been. Inti Creates decided to make a true 2D action platformer that went back to the punishing roots of the early games. But they also added new changes to the gameplay to make Mega Man Zero feel like a step forward in the design as well. When I first learned about the Zero series, I don't actually remember, but I think I wrote it off. It was on the Game Boy Advance, and I'm pretty sure I thought it was some throwaway title like Mega Man Soccer. By the time I found out more about it, the series was already over. I ended up beating 1 and 2, but I never got to the rest. I know that I enjoyed both though, so I'll be looking forward to playing the other games. But let me not get ahead of myself and start with this one. Also, I won't be going over any lore that has happened in later Zero games. I'm only focusing on Mega Man Zero. So let's start off with the story. It kicks off a century after the Maverick Wars. A human scientist named CL and the Resistance seek the legendary hero Zero. While searching for Zero, they are pursued by Neo-Arcadian forces. They find the ruins where Zero is, but oh no, he's sealed. The Neo-Arcadians got the Reploids pinned down and everybody's dying left and right. The cyber elf with CL sacrifices herself to break the seal, and it would all be very dramatic and sad if she didn't look like a fly hitting the windshield. But that did manage to wake him up, and then we get a nice little throwback. Zero is awake, but he has amnesia. Why does a robot have amnesia? How can a robot have amnesia? Either way, CL asks for help and Zero's like, sure. Not that he actually says yes, he just starts blasting. After getting through the initial enemies, you fight a golem. Shooting it does little damage, but another elf comes in and he gives you a Z-Saber. One slash from the Z-Saber and the golem is gone. After talking with CL, Zero is disturbed to learn that Reploids suffer from horrific oppression at the hands of a ruler who is none other than his former partner X. Zero agrees to help the Resistance fight X's forces to liberate the Reploids. Later on, CL confesses the truth. The ruler of Neo-Arcadia is not X. It is an imperfect copy of him created after the original mysteriously disappeared. The real X is now the elf that gave Zero his sword. I gotta say, I like how they did that. I like how Zero got the sword from X here. If you remember, X got Zero's saber back in X5, and technically he still had it in X6. So Zero getting it back from him here is a nice touch. I don't know what happened to the saber Zero was using in X6, but let's not worry about that. The world currently is in an energy crisis. Copy X began executing Reploids in order to reduce the energy consumption and preserve the human. He also has a group of underlings called the Four Guardians, and the Four Guardians have robots under them. Having this dedicated hierarchy of villains makes the world feel more organized, giving the player a clear target branch to dismantle. Looking back at the story, it kind of makes me sad. Zero sealed himself away thinking that would be what would be best for the world, but apparently not. He thought he was too dangerous, but the world still became what it is now without him. X probably wouldn't even disappeared if Zero was still there. Coming off the story, let's talk about some of the new changes they decided to go with. As for the production, it's obviously limited with this being on the Game Boy Advance. However, I think they did a great job with what they had. The cutscenes are a mixture between in-game graphics and character portraits with text boxes. No voice acting. You get a few compressed voices, mainly grunts, but that's about it. It feels cheap in comparison to X4, but expensive in comparison to X5. They also went in a different direction with the art style in this game. That's not a big surprise. Every series in the franchise has its own look. It's a fine style on its own, but I just don't like the big chibi pupils. Speaking of big chibi pupils, let's talk about CL. She's a scientist. She's very young looking, even though she is apparently a teenager. She's the only human being living at the Resistance base. Everyone else is a Reploid. Why is she there? Because she doesn't want the Reploids to be retired needlessly. She is the one who originally created Copy X, so she does have some guilt about what's happening. She also wants to create a new energy source so humans and Reploids can go back to living side by side. Going back to the art style, I don't care for Zero's new look either. It looks like somebody thought, hey, CL is 14, let's make Zero look 15. Instead of having armor on, he has what looks like to be a puffer jacket and a tracksuit. But they still kept the signature white underwear, which is something they definitely could have switched out. I'm being biased here, but on its own, Zero looks fine, but in comparison to the original one, he looks worse. The graphics in the game are a big plus. I wouldn't be surprised if this game had some of the best graphics on the GBA. Everything is big and it's easy to tell what it is. I should mention right now that the game is very difficult, but the moment-to-moment controls are very tight. Zero feels fast. As usual, dashing, wall climbing, jumping, primary tools for survival. You also get a custom menu where you can map your main and sub weapons to different buttons. It gives you flexibility to adapt whatever enemy is on the screen without breaking the game flow. Another change up here is that you don't get any sub weapons, but you do get 4 different weapons to cycle through. You start with your standard Buster and you get the iconic Z-Saber. A bit later, a base engineer named, probably butchered this guy's name, serve you, hands over the triple rod, which gives you downward pogo attacks, and the shield boomerang, which reflects projectiles and can do good damage if you know how to use it. Zero also get elemental chips, fire, ice, and thunder, which he can equip to his weapons to change their properties. It turns classic weakness mechanic into more of a fluid system. The weapon leveling system is something. I actually like the concept, but it could have been less of a grind. You start off with a basic slash. If you want a combo or do a charge slash, you have to grind for it. I spent a good 20 minutes running around in the same area trying to unlock Zero's basic skills. You could have at least gave the player the 3-hit combo when the game started, and then keep the charge slash, the rolling slash, and the decreased charge time locked. That would have worked a lot better for, I would say, most people. When it comes to the boss AI balance, things are different from the 16-bit days. In the older games, you could hit a boss with a weakness and trap them in a stun loop until they died, but not here. In Mega Man Zero, the bosses shrug off the hit stun. You hit them with their elemental weakness and they take a good chunk of damage, but they get knocked back immediately, or they get their invincibility frames and force you to still dodge. So you actually do have to, fight. Another thing is that using Zero's 3-hit combo can actually work on bosses here too, making this a better risk versus reward style of fighting. You can stay in close and execute your melee string, but you more than likely will not be able to dodge the next attack. The biggest thing is that the screen being cropped makes everything harder. The Game Boy Advance just doesn't do this concept justice. It's not the developer's fault. There's a good amount of games that had the same problem, but knowing that just doesn't help. We know that Zero's speed makes him more suitable for timed stages. Now he finally has his own dedicated game built entirely around those close quarter combat loops. Taking a character who thrives on high speed movement and also making a ranking system that has it in there and trapping him in this tiny aspect ratio creates a lot of friction. Going from the screen space of this one to this is a difficulty curve all on its own. Because this game is hard, you will lose lives. But if you're on a mission and you lose all your lives, you will be forced to quit the mission and the mission will be a failure. You won't get to replay that mission, so you permanently will miss out on the boss fight and other things in that stage. For example, the cyber elves that the bosses drop or any elemental chips that they may drop as well. I remember my first time I played through this game, I did not get any elemental chips. And when I replayed it, I was surprised to see elemental chips, because instead of hunting down hidden armor capsules, you'll be hunting these elves down instead. They act as your upgrades. You have nurse elves that give you health boosts, animal elves that save you from falling in pits, and hacker elves that can stun enemies. But if you feed them a huge amount of energy crystals to use them, once they activate, they will die. It is a tedious grind. The game forces you to farm crystals off enemies, and you need thousands. Over 27,000. I looked that up. There's no way I'm doing that. Farming crystals already takes enough time as is. I prefer the old method where Dr. Light's capsules gave you permanent enhancements without a ridiculous penalty. It feels like the game actively discourages you from using the tools it provides, because technically it is. To add on to that, the game gives you a report card after every mission, rank A to F. If you use a permanent elf to give yourself a health buffer, it docks your score permanently. But you know what? That doesn't sound too bad. What are the benefits to getting a high rank? Well, if you maintain an A or even an S rank, the bosses unlock EX skills. They actually get new, harder attacks, so if your rank drops to a B or lower, the bosses will be stripped of their movesets. Using upgrades to survive means that you miss out on boss mechanics. I'm good. The game's hard enough as is without them. Another thing is that if you maintain an A rank, you can unlock a door behind CL to get into her room, and you'll find an elf. An elf that you can't use in order to maintain your rank. Thanks. So what's the point of having this elf? Well, there is one reason you might want this elf. There are 3 additional unlockable modes: hard mode, Jackson mode, and then ultimate mode. Hard mode is unlocked by beating the game once. In this mode, Zero takes 50% more damage, cannot use cyber elves, and his weapons cannot level up or become elemental. Jackson mode is when you have beat the game on hard mode with at least an A rank, and you find and feed all of the cyber elves. Once again, 27,000 E crystals. The Jackson elf gives you invincibility for a while. Ultimate mode is unlocked by beating the game after using every cyber elf, including Jackson. You can hold R when starting a new game to access this mode, which starts Zero off with all permanent cyber elf effects already in use, no penalties, and gives him access to full charge attacks instantly using simplistic button combos. In other words, you need to master the game before you can use any of the elves. What is the percentage of players you think actually decide to do this? Because I'm going with less than 10%. Another thing about this is that some of these elves are sub-tanks. So that's part of the permanent thing. Like, oh, not only are they the sub-tanks, but they're also the hearts, the things that permanently increase your, your health. So you have to find these things, and then you have to grind to get them to be usable, and then you can't use them because the game is going to tell you that you suck for using it. It's almost like they threw these in here to mock you. Oh, you needed that sub heart? Well, here you go. But if you end up using it, just know I think that you suck, and I'm going to keep letting you know that you suck for the rest of the game. I like how they show the base. You actually get to see and talk to other Reploids that you're fighting with or saving out in the field. You can visit Serviu in his lab or talk to Alouette in the hallway. It grounds the hub world. It gives the resistance a actual personality instead of just being faceless. There aren't too many side quests though, but there is one where you can give a Reploid 250 E crystals and he'll let you pass to get another elf. Compare this to the little extras of the Super Nintendo trilogy. In those games, beating a boss could alter the environment of another stage. Here, environments do not feel isolated at all. The entire world map feels interconnected. Running out of the resistance base, you could go to the desert and then go all the way to the disposal center without seeing a loading screen. It is an ambitious layout. It's cool when the environments feel physically linked rather just floating in a void, but they lack an interactive touch. They don't change based on your actions, not mostly. There is one situation where things do change up as far as the missions are concerned, but that's about it. If you decide to walk back and forth, you will usually see the exact same enemy spawns. It feels like a missed opportunity to make the world feel more responsive. I already talked about the intro stage, so let's move on to other stages. The next mission you take is going to be the disposal center, where you fight Aztec Falcon. This is where they're taking Reploids they captured to be retired. As I said before, because this is a different style, Zero don't get a dedicated sub weapon for this. he gets a cyber elf instead. And also in this particular fight, he gets the thunder chip. Next mission we got is retrieve data in the underground lab. The level geometry is actually a reverse run of the lab from the opening scene. You start right where the golem fight was, and then you ascend through vertical shafts. At the very end of the stage where Zero was found, you find Maha Ganashev. He is an elephant robot that rolls around the room and drops weights from the ceiling. You just dash under him when he jumps. Next we got the destroy train mission. They want the train destroyed so they can mess up Neo Arcadia's supply chain. Zero boards the train there, where he has to beat the clock in order to get to the engine in 3 minutes. When you get there, you come face to face with the Pantheon Core, a security system protecting the train's engine. One of the easier boss fights in the game. Rescue Kolber near the tracks from the train objective. You get deployed to a dilapidated industrial zone to handle a rescue. The stage starts with a leftward march over shattered terrain full of unstable platforms. Exploration and fast thinking are rewarded by a vertical climb past missile firing ravens that leads to more elf crates. The quest ends in a place where you find Kolber, but you also find Harpunia, one of the 4 guardians. He flies around shooting sonic booms and forcing you to dash under his attacks and hit him while he hovers. In the desert area, you have Find Shuttle and Duel in Desert. For the Find Shuttle mission, you head into the desert to find a shuttle that has crash landed to see if there are any survivors. Here you fight Anubis Necromancies. He throws his stave around and conjures robotic zombies. The fight is decent enough after you figure out his pattern. Defeating him gets you the fire chip. But the mission is not over yet because you have to find an injured Reploid and you have to escort him back to base. He can die, so it will be a long walk back. The other mission, you get a report that enemies are assembling out in the desert for a large-scale assault. Your comrades built barricades, but they're getting overwhelmed. At the end of the trek, you fight Fafnir, another one of the 4 guardians. He shoots fireballs at you and tries to grab you. He also has the Terry Bogard's move, Earth Wave or whatever he's saying. You have to maintain your spacing to get him while he recovers between attacks. I don't think he has a set pattern, and with that being said, he ended up killing me a lot. In the ocean caverns, you have the secret base. It's an old research facility used by Reploid Marines long ago. Neo Arcadia turned it into a prison camp where captured Reploids are organized and shipped out to be used as test subjects or for extra parts. The first time you enter during the story, the water is completely frozen over, where you have to rescue 7 Reploids held captive by Blizak Stragov. He's a big target, so hitting him isn't hard, but he shoots ice beams that freeze you in place. Defeating him gives you the ice chip. Later in the game, the base is used to hack into HQ using 6 large computers. When Zero returns to the area, the ice is melted, flipping the stage layout. Now you are forced to traverse through water while avoiding being crushed by the floating submarines to enter the facility. You have to locate the computer room hidden on the upper right side behind some large pipes, destroy the computers, and defeat Fairy Leviathan. The water physics float around you while she shoots homing missiles and drop ice shards down on you. I found that if you stay at the edge, half of her attacks won't hit you. Hit her with fire and she's an easy boss. Even without the weakness, she's the easiest guardian. At the abandoned factory, you have to occupy the factory, and then you have to protect the factory. This place used to be a prosperous Reploid assembly plant built around an E-crystal mining facility, but then it got shut down. Because it's still a valuable reservoir of energy, CL adds Zero to help occupy it for the resistance. You have to defeat the guard in order to occupy this area. Later on, Hidden Phantom infiltrates the same plant and plants 8 bombs to blow the facility up. So once Zero gets there, you have to actually fight the boss first and then go afterwards into the factory to stop all the bombs. Hidden Phantom may be the hardest of the 4 guardians that I have went against. The pitfall with the conveyor belts are pretty annoying, but I did come to realize that if you slide down the wall, you can kind of see the top of the platforms of metal that you stand on. You can see those coming if you slide down the wall. Other than that portion of the factory, everything else is pretty standard though. Since you go back to these 4 areas twice, there really isn't of a difference that you've seen between them, but they do at least try something. I'm assuming they had to do that because of storage issues, but I don't have too much of an issue overall in revisiting places that you've been to before. before. As long as you can switch it up a little bit, maybe if they could have switched out some of the enemies to help it feel a little bit different, then it would have worked a little better, even though, you know, most people would rather not have to revisit the same areas, especially if you go back to the abandoned factory while you're not on a mission. They got a bunch of places where you can grab e-crystals, so I would definitely suggest you do that. You also get an emergency mission mid-game where you have to stop a tank from infiltrating the base. There's also a mission where Neo Arcadia infiltrates the base and you have to defend it. There's also 3 different ways you can get this mission. One is if you complete all the missions. 2 is if you end up not being able to stop the tank. And 3 is if you fail 3 consecutive missions in a row. The last one was something I heard. I haven't actually experienced that, so I can't really say whether or not that point is true. But either way, eventually Zero infiltrates Neo Arcadia. The first thing I want to say is that I like the background of the first stage. Neo Arcadia is supposed to be a nice place, and that's how it looks. As you make your way into enemy territory, you fight 2 mid bosses and then the actual boss. Simple fights in comparison to the Guardians. 3 of them anyway. The final stages are a gauntlet of spikes, bottomless pits, and strict enemy placements. You are climbing towers and avoiding turrets. You go through the standard boss rematches, defeating the 4 Guardians again. This time I fought everyone with their weakness and I had a much easier time, except for Hidden Phantom. This one still took a while. Did anybody else die from that kamikaze attack? Because I definitely thought that was part of a cutscene and I had low health when he did it, so he definitely took me out. Before you face Copy X, the other Guardians come in and they stand in Zero's way. Somebody had to have thought,
man, let's jump.
But Copy comes in and says they are too weak, so here is the final fight. His first form is a fight that rewards platforming mastery. He dashes around the room, swaps elements, and you have to read his movements cleanly. He uses sliding attacks, aerial projectiles, forcing you to utilize your dash in 5 safe zones. Then he transforms into his Seraph form. He traps you between bottomless pits while shooting lasers from his hands or setting the ground on fire. He also has a tech that drops barriers from the ceiling that will hold you in place. Now this took me about a good hour to beat. I didn't know he had a weakness, so that was a big reason why. I tried using elements with the Buster Shot, but nothing seemed to work, so yeah, I just went ahead and toughed it out. And here's where I thought, okay, I'm gonna use an elf, a sub-tank, right? So I ended up using it and found out they don't come full. All that effort into grinding for this thing and I can't even get this thing already full. Anyway, he talks before he uses certain moves, so that's the tell. The problem was how to dodge it after hearing it. But little by little, I figured out his pattern until I beat him. I don't know how other people feel about this fight, but I thought it was hard, but fair. After beating Copy X, he tries to take you out with him, and Zero almost perishes in the resulting explosion before Original X appears as a cyber elf, whisking him away into the wilderness, where Zero faces a never-ending army. I feel like X was getting a little bit of payback for Zero leaving him like 100 years ago. I also want to say that looking back at the story, I want to applaud Copy X in his endeavors to make a safe place for humans. Granted, maybe he could have waited to see if another energy source would have been made, but he had humans first, like the X series. In this series, we are on the side of the robots. We are the Mavericks being hunted. The Resistance have been labeled Mavericks. Zero's a Maverick for no reason other than CL found him first. X turned Maverick by helping a Maverick. CL is basically, you know, the new Dr. Wily, creating an energy source to help humanity or plot twist wipe out humanity with. Also, the Reploids can be rebuilt, but they can't just be sat down. I mean, you know, put them in sleep mode and send them somewhere in the corner. The audio tracks are composed well. The composers did what they could with the sound chip. I like the throwback to Zero's original theme music. The melodies have a different feel from other Mega Man games. They seem to lean more into building an atmosphere, which is cool, but it's also a step down from the quality that we got on 16 and 32-bit consoles. Nothing really stood out to me as I was playing the game except for the final fight with Copy X. Intermission is fine, desert theme is fine, everything else is just fine. far as the modern ROM hacking goes, I didn't find any big projects, but there are a few that fix the game's coding and pacing issues. Fans have created specific quality of life patches that target the core balance of the game. There are improvement hacks that completely remove the E-crystal grinding and weapon leveling requirements altogether. Instead of sitting in a corner for an hour, you get to just use the full moveset right out of the gate. Other modern hacks unlock an immediate ultimate mode style configuration from the main menu that I talked about before. This lets you map cyber elf buffs directly to your save file without actually killing the elves. Even better, it removes the permanent rank penalties on your scorecard. You can finally use health upgrades without the game dropping you to a D rank and locking you out of the boss EX skills. There's one with infinite lives so you can't fail a mission, and there's a way to increase the screen resolution. It's not widescreen, but it does give a little bit more room to see what's in front of you, and any extra room is an upgrade. If you're going to play this game today on an emulator, you may want to try a patched version. It cleans up the progression balance and lets you enjoy the game's actual depth without the artificial roadblocks. Going back to Mega Man Zero, it's a solid action game, but I wish it was on a better console. If this was on PlayStation 1 or 2, it would have got a lot more recognition and not be written off by gamers like myself. It is worth playing today. The combat is fast, the bosses are good but hard, and the story takes the franchise in a nice direction. The camera crunch and the grinding mechanics hold it back from perfection though. It paved the way for better sequels, but the growing pains are obvious. Just use cyber elves and don't worry about the ranking system. You'll have a much better time. Thanks for watching. What did you guys think about the cyber elves grading system? Was it a cool idea, or should they stay with the same style as the Mega Man X series? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'll be moving between 02 and X7 within the next few weeks. But before that, I do have one different platformer that I do want to throw out there. If you have any game that you want me to cover next, let me know, and I'll see you in the next video.